welcome to episode 2 of the Irish Rally podcast with me, Kevin Regan. And what a first week it's been. You've been listening in huge numbers across all platforms, and in doing so, it took the Irish Rally podcast to 8 in the Irish Apple Podcast charts. 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts do help hugely with regards to charts on that platform, and again, thanks to all who've done that so far. And if you still like what you're hearing, then that would be appreciated, and of course you will remain anonymous. Thanks also to everyone who got in touch with us, and again, all reviews are most welcome as we strive to give Irish rallying the exposure it so badly needs and deserves. The good news during the week is that the Wexford Stages Rally, which is scheduled to take place on the 5th and 6th of September, has been given the green light. So, in light of that news, we speak to a man who has won the Wexford Rally 5 times in a row. He also finished third in the Circuit of Ireland just a few short years after taking up the sport, and he won back-to-back national titles in the mid-90s without losing a single rally along the way. This week's guest is Stephen Murphy, and the episode is in association with M. Cody Stoneworks, Castlecomer, County Kilkenny. Now, it's a pleasure to be joined by Stephen Murphy on the Irish Rally podcast. Stephen, it's good to have you on the show. We have very uncertain times, of course, the last couple of months. I hope you've been keeping well. But good news for Irish motorsport this week with the news that the Wexford Stages Rally is actually going ahead, and that's after giving a lot of competitors and fans something to really look forward to, all going well.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Rallying has suffered the same as I suppose all of us with COVID-19, the events being cancelled and so forth. So look, I'd say Wexford are very happy to be the first to I suppose, be let back in, and hopefully, like every other event that they run down there, to be a success, and I'm sure it will. And I know that a lot of guys are only I suppose, very anxious to get out and get rallying again, because the rally fever has been put to bed as well for the last 3.5-4 months.
Absolutely, it's an event that was very kind to you down through the years. You won it a good few times.
Yeah, I won it 5 times in a row, from 91 to 96, I think it was. Yeah, I had great rallies down there against a lot of good competitors like Endon Olin, Donny O'Sullivan, Gwenda Evans, Melvin Evans, all those guys, and happy memories of a lot of people and a lot of support that I got down in Wexford, and made a lot of new friends and everything by, I suppose, doing the Wexford event. And to be fair to the Wexford Motor Club, they run a super event. Lovely stages, not rough and tumble. Every stage was one better than the other, and that's what I always felt about Wexford. Fast and flowing, tricky but fast and flowing stages, which every competitor loves to have, because nobody, I suppose, wants these bumpy, bad, dirty laneways. That's not, I suppose, rallying that a lot of people like to see, and a lot of competitors like to see, because the value of cars and everything else, you don't want to see them broken up, even though everybody has offs, as I've had myself. So there you are.
Yeah. What got Steve Murphy into rallying in the first place? It's the late 80s you kind of made your breakthrough.
I'll tell you exactly. I went to an event with Endon Olin, and we were standing up in the ditch, as you do, and watching competitors passing and so forth. And I just turned to Enda and I said, look, gee, that's something I wouldn't mind trying my hand at. And he said, yeah, you should. And Enda had been at it for years with the likes of David MacDonald and Paul Shield and people like that. So I researched, I suppose, trying to buy a car. And the first car I bought was a Sunbeam 1600. And I suppose the first event I did then was up to Monaghan. And a chap called Liam Clark who sat in with Enda a good few times. And up in Monaghan, as you know, the tricky stages, going pretty okay for a first event, struck a ditch and broke a front strut in the steering wheel. So that put us out of that event. And then my local event was Carlow, was the next one I chose to do. And when we did that, line 6th overall over near a place called Taylor's Cross near Michael. Going line 6th, as I say, going as hard as we could, came down to what we would call a left 6, down through the box, going so hard, put the centre out through the clutch. And I said, this maybe is not the car for me. So I went along and bought a works Toyota Corolla. And the following year, we won 3 championships, the Dunlop Tarmac Championship, the Foley Championship outright and the 1600 National Championship as well. So I suppose that got me in, and that was a seriously super car. And I believe nowadays they make a fortune if you have one. So if I had to keep it, it would be worth a lot of money, but I couldn't afford to do that. So I suppose, got into it through Enda Nolan, in fairness to Lord Mercy on him.
Yeah, Enda, a great competitor. Known, I suppose, for the, for the Sierra, the Green Sierra in particular, with the SO on the side of it. That's what I know Enda for, and he had incredible pace,
Absolutely.
hadn't
he? Yeah, well, one of the best days I had in Wexford was against Enda. He had the SO Sierra, as you said, 4-door. I had MXI 95904, which was a four-door Sierra as well. And going into the last stage, there was 10 seconds between us, and both of us were on the door handles for the 2 days. And effectively, on the last stage, I took 1 second off him, so I won the rally by 11 seconds. But Enda was a seriously super competitor and a lovely guy. And, motorsport was at a huge loss when Enda Nolan passed away, I can tell you that.
Absolutely, and I played some hurling underage with his son Tom. He's a great guy as well, and I know I know him fairly well. Just a great guy. Unfortunately, like I wouldn't have known Enda Turbo well because I'm Tom's age, and I wouldn't have came across him. But look, by all accounts, a fantastic competitor. And the thing that strikes me, the two of you, like you had serious pace, in particular from your own point of view in the early days.
Sure, look, I suppose we had no sense, and we had very little commitment, and you gave it everything that you had, and if you won on the day, well and good. If not, and a competitor could beat you, well then, But I when you say sometimes, when you get going to a good standard and get the pace up, and you have nice stages that you like. You'll drive well and things will work well for you. You get no breakdowns or no offs or anything like that. You need luck. And you need luck in any sport, I suppose, in one way. And if you don't have that luck, well, I suppose then that on the day you don't win. But Wexford, as I say, was always seriously good to me. Another great event I had, again, was against Donny O'Sullivan. I had a Subaru. S11, and he had Ford Escort, and we were going into the last stage, and there was 8 or 9 seconds between us. And of course, we being ourselves, we took out the spare wheel, took out the jack, just put the bare amount of fuel, and I never ever rallied in torrential rain, and this was just rain standing on the road, and we put on a full set of wets. And again, took 1 second out of Donny to win the rally. And, those events you remember quite well because they're so competitive and you're up against the cream of the cream. And to be fair to Enda and the likes of Donny O'Sullivan, they were serious competitors, but most enjoyable. And when it was over, we'd have the crack and we'd have the laugh. And I suppose, the sing-songs and all that, I miss all that. And all that's gone over rallying, which is sad, really, because we had great fun. We had great fun over the years.
Yeah, so take us back to like your first ever win, because I know 91 was a big year. You started getting really good results in 91.
Yeah, as I said, I bought the 1600 Toyota Corolla, which was an ex-works car. If anyone would remember, the number was 86 CW23. And, we did various events and won our class. And during that year, then we won the Foley Championship outright. We won the 1600 Dunlop Tarmac Championship outright, and we won the 1600 National Championship outright. And indeed, did the Cork 20, and we finished 6th overall in the Cork 20 after breaking an engine mount. And Joe Deacon got up on a ditch, got a piece of timber and a piece of wire. He shoved up the engine. I pushed in the timber underneath because he was a lot stronger than me, and tied the wire around the engine mount to get to the end of the stage. But we finished 6th overall, and had serious results in that car. Very, very good.
I remember another incident. I'm sure you can kind of look back and laugh at it now, but yourself and Joe were pulled in, and Joe was lifting the bonnet anyway, and next thing the bonnet came back and smashed the windscreen. Can you remember that in particular?
Do I remember? Will I ever forget? Absolutely. One of those things, you see, and you don't think of those things on the day, but You know, if it was nowadays, you'd probably be out of the rally with a broken windscreen. But we actually continued on. And I think we finished third overall. That was the Circuit of Munster,
Right.
that rally. And that was in Jimmy McRae's old two-wheel drive Sierra, D418 SVW. Actually, Frank Marr had the same type of car in the Stone Throwers, and when we came up against Frank. But that was a seriously good car. Very, very reliable.
Yeah. What was the conversation like with Joe after that happened?
Look, Joe and I suppose Joe sat in with me for 12 years. We never had a crossword, only once down in Clare, the Clare Rally. I I had to go and rescue somebody else that had a problem with a caravan that I'd sold them and an awning on the side of it, which was a funny story. But we went off down to I suppose, sort the problem, Thomas Corrigan and I, who was one of the mechanics. And, of course, we were tearing back, and Joe was ringing me, look, we've only X amount of time to get back and all that. And I said, Joe, take the car apart for me. I'll be there as quick as I can. That was the only time I ever saw Joe annoyed with me, because he was under pressure and we were first on the road, so we needed to get out. But you know something? It actually helped us to win the rally on the day, because there wasn't a word between us going to the first stage, and I had to drive pretty quick to get out to the start of the stage, not to be penalised for being late. So you can only imagine. But Joe and I got on extremely well. Joe was a very, very good navigator and very dedicated to the job as well.
Yeah, and of course, you know, not a million miles away from your home place. You then had Mickey Joe Morrissey on board with you for, you know, a pretty solid relationship as well. And, you know, I'm thinking back to the times then, 95 and 96 in particular, when you went back-to-back with the national championships. And that Group A Escort was just a fabulous piece of machinery, which you drove so well.
Yeah, look, I was blessed. I had Matt O'Reilly, who was one of the mechanics I had, and Thomas Corrigan. But without those two lads, I wouldn't have won any championship. I can tell you that honestly, because they kept us going when the thing was, I suppose, giving us a bit of trouble or a bit of bother. And you know, Matt O'Reilly was dedicated so much that at his lunch break, when he was working with Burns Garage in Tullow, he'd come home and he'd be under the car doing something. That night he'd be under it again. Seriously dedicated. And you know, it's not about the driver or the navigator at times, it's all about the team you have behind you. I had Michael Dundon then, was a guy in tyres. My brother Des did mud notes and so forth. So we had a fantastic team. And you know, if you don't have a team that I suppose you can depend on, you could be often in trouble as well. And they were seriously super guys to work with, and very, very good. And the encouragement that they give you then as well was brilliant, you know.
Yeah, and you had the backing of Statoil as well, and that was obviously a huge help.
Yeah, no, Statoil. I had Statoil for about 6 years. We were distributors for them here, and you know, you can't rally without sponsorship. And I was lucky that Statoil were very, very good to me for the 6 years, because it's not a cheap sport, but you know, it was something that I got hooked on, because I took to it like water to a duck, I suppose, or a duck to water, should I say. But yeah. You always need money, and money is what keeps a car going, and petrol, we say tyres, service, meals for the lads, bedroom nights and all that. But I was very lucky, the people that sponsored me, you know, if we were going somewhere, we might get a hotel and they'd give you a good deal or whatever. And you need that in rallying, because it's just a very expensive sport, you know. Just on a light note, I had Owen McCarthy, who was one of the bosses in Kingspan, and Kingspan sponsored me for a good few years as well. But the first time, he gave me a set of tyres, and about, I suppose, 3 weeks to a month later, he called into the office again to see me, and he said, "How are my tyres going?" And I said, "Oh, they're probably on the silage pit somewhere around Ballymurphy or Rahana or somewhere like that." He said, "What?" He said, "You mean to tell me they're worn already?" I said, "Yeah, unfortunately, Owen, we probably got 8 stages out of them and then chucked them off." "Ah, you're joking." Well, he said, "Look, we'll have to give you something else." So, and that's struck up another relationship which got us more sponsorship, because in fairness to him, when he suggested he give me a set of tyres, I hadn't the heart to tell him that wasn't enough. But, you know, when he heard that we only got 8 stages, he gave us more the next time round, you know. And it's people like that you need behind you when you're rallying.
Yeah, it's such an expensive taste. I mean, every penny counts, and like it must have been difficult at times. It wasn't all plain sailing, I'm sure, during the 90s when you were trying to get the car on the road, like.
Ah, no, Christ, no. Uh, you'd be beg, steal or borrow, and you'd be trucking and trading and trying to make, a few bob for the next rally to get the car out to get the event. But as I said, the likes of Matt O'Reilly, the likes of Thomas Corrigan, the likes of Michael Dunham, my brother Des, and Joe, to be fair to him, used to put his hand in his pocket as well to support the whole thing. And without that, you couldn't dream of rallying. And I'm sure today it's a lot more expensive, and it was bad enough then,
Yeah, and just on the whole national back-to-back thing, which was huge at the time. In one of those years, am I right in saying you won? Was it 8 out of 9 events?
I finished with full points both years back to back, which meant that we didn't lose any rally. We won every rally that we went.
That's incredible.
And did. Yeah, well, sure, look. I suppose, again, it was a lot of it luck, because sometimes you get a breakdown or you get a puncture or, the usual. But no, we were very lucky, and to win 95 and 96 back-to-back was absolutely brilliant. And then to get the drive for Honda from Hong Kong to Beijing, because I was the seeded driver after that, that was super. I was
going to come to you on that and ask you how it kind of came about, like, yeah.
Well, look, as I'm sitting in my office, I'm looking at the number plate off the front of the car, and I'm also looking at the number 11. We started 11 and we finished 11, and we won the class. And I suppose Joe and I are probably the only two guys in Ireland that have the FIA trophy for the 1600 class in Hong Kong to Beijing. It was a super event. Over 7 days, roughly 3,800 kilometres, starting approximately 5:30 in the morning and not getting back to the hotel till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. It was long days, but I lost, I think, about 3/4 of a stone in the week, because the food and that out there is a little different than we have here.
Yeah, geez, like, it's just the logistics involved in that as well. I mean, it was great to obviously get the deal, but I know there was a bit of a carrot dangling as well. Wasn't there talks of getting another drive in a couple of events if that event had gone well or something like that?
Yeah, there was, but the team that look, the guy that it was a company called MIT Sanyan, which was made in Taiwan. Sanyan, it stood for. And the guy that actually owned it, he had a similar car, and he crashed out, I think, in the 5th or 6th stage. He went out on the first day. We were very lucky that we kept it going. And the car, like, I had never driven left-hand drive before. I'd never driven front-wheel drive before. And I never had driven on loose surface. I was a tarmac driver up to then. So it was a whole new learning curve. But something, it was brilliant event. I can still see some of the places we went through, like where the COVID started was a place called Wuhan. And when we were coming to go through Wuhan itself, the guy that ran the rally said, guys, look, you got to stay blowing the horn as you go through this city. And I kind of wondered to myself, why was that? But you know what, when we came to it, we knew exactly, because there was thousands upon millions of people out looking, and you had to blow the horn for them to dissipate in front of me. It was like Moses parting the Red Sea. That's the way we were going through the place,
Yeah. Geez, it took you all over the world, really, because you mentioned that particular event. I know you were in Belgium as well, and maybe a couple of other places.
Yeah, we did Flanders, and we did Madeira. Where else did we go? Can I remember? Flanders, Madeira, and somewhere else. Yeah, we got some lovely deals and some lovely offers to go, and sure, for the lads it was great, because they got a kind of a holiday out of it, and we made it a holiday, put it to you that way.
Yeah.
Enjoying the event,
Absolutely. And like, when you get to do that as well, isn't it great to pitch yourself against drivers from different parts of the world, just to see what the standard is, I suppose?
Well, when we did Hong Kong to Beijing, the first night we sat down to eat a meal, Ari Vatanen sat alongside us, and also Richard Burns, Lord mercy on him. And
wow.
to be sitting with guys like that, having a bite to eat and having a chat, because I suppose some of the rest of the guys had no English, but these two lads, it was great to chat to them and talk about what like, we didn't do a recce because we couldn't. So there was a guy driving a Toyota Celica called Fujimoto, and we got a set of his notes, and his notes were completely opposite to ours. We used from 1 to 6, and a 6 was always a right angle bend, and he used a 6 as a flat bend. So we had to change all the notes. And in fairness to Joe Deacon, he changed them every night for the next day. And you know something, he never made one mistake. And I suppose that got us through as well, because I knew what was coming, and he knew what he had to mark as dangerous and so forth, because the other guy had it marked the same way, you know.
Yeah. So bringing it back to home turf then, you know, the next big one for you, the Escort WRC, another fabulous piece of machinery. And I know in 1998 in particular, I suppose you were probably targeting that year and that machine as the one that maybe was just going to get you this Tarmac Championship. And I tell you, you had serious competition at the time with the likes of Fisher, Lord rest him, like him, McHale.
Yeah.
I know Amar didn't come back till maybe 99 or 2000. And I'll talk to you about Fisher and Amar as well separately. But that was a seriously competitive time. And you must have fancied your chances as well, though, at the same time.
I did, but you know something, looking back on everything, you learn an awful lot. I was rallying against guys that had works cars. My car, I could only afford to build it to a certain standard. So, you know, that extra second a kilometre made an awful difference. Like, you know, you'd be beaten by 8 or 9 or 10 seconds, and you'd wonder to yourself, where did I lose that 8 or 9 seconds? You know, because I'd be driving as hard as I thought I could, but yet you'd go to the end of the stage and you'd say, oh, jeez, he took 10 seconds off us. And you'd wonder, where did I lose that on the stage, you know? But it was all down to how, I suppose, you know, competitive your car was against the works machinery. Like Bertie always had the best, Austin McHale always had the best, Frank Marr, to be fair to him, had the best as well, and he put every shilling I suppose he had into it. So, you know, that's the way you'd have to look at it. But I had to build the car according to my pocket, and that's what I did. And that's not me making poor mouths or anything. It's just the way it was, you know.
Yeah. Do you think with the works back in that you possibly could have pushed for that Tarmac Championship?
You'd certainly like to think you would. I mean, in '93, when I had the two-wheel drive Sierra, we did the Circle of Ireland. We finished third overall, and that was the next works car belonged to Jimmy McRae. But you can imagine he had that car in '86. We rallied it 7 years later, so you can imagine how much the technology had moved on in that 7 years. But we could only afford what we could only afford, and you know that's the way it was. But you know what? To win a lot of rallies like the Circle of Ireland back then, you had to keep the car going no matter what. If you could keep it going and you had a certain pace, you know, you'd probably get a good finish. And that's the way. It's like somebody said to me one time, he said, Stephen, to finish first you must finish. And it's a very true statement, you know.
It is. You mentioned, you know, the third place finish in the circuit. Another very impressive finish I can recall anyway is Killarney in the year 2000, because Stephen Finlay made his comeback. Frank was back as well. And that was, Jesus, there was serious machinery down there. And you came third. I think, was it Bertie's ex-car you came third in?
Yeah, it was the R55 FEL. I'll tell you an interesting story. When I went to buy that from Bertie, went up to Enniskillen, and he brought the car out to Enniskillen Airfield.
Right.
And of course, I put on the helmet, sat in the passenger seat. Bertie got in, drove down the first straight, handbrake, turned left, down to the next straight, handbraked again, down the other side, back up, and handbraked all the whole way around. And no, really impressed, really impressive, really good. I always thought Bertie was a serious driver. Anyway, we stopped anyway after doing 2 laps of the airfield. Got out, I put the helmet on the roof, and Bertie put the helmet on the opposite side, and he said, see here, you young Murphy. He said, what do you think of that car now? And of course, I jokingly said to him, God, Bertie, I can't understand why you didn't win more rallies in it. And he said to me, I will remind you of that. You know? And another really nice man, a very, very decent man. I bought that car from him that time. And you know something? I had to ring him sometime later to say, Bertie, would you ever put in the other check I gave you? It hasn't gone through. He says, there's no rush. He says, I'll put it in, there's no while. He says, I know you guys are trying to get going and so forth. Very, very decent man. And in actual fact, so decent and got so friendly with him, he invited us up to his 50th birthday party and I stayed in his house. But a seriously genuine fellow.
Yeah.
You know?
Geez, that's brilliant to have that sort of relationship. And you had many dealings with him down through the years. Obviously, you're the best of friends and the best of enemies, as people would say. But I'm sure you would have seen many dealings with Bertie up close and personal.
Yeah. Look, he was in the same game, albeit that he was in a much bigger way than we were. Like he would probably produce 30,000 tons of steel a year, where we were only making 7,000 and 8,000 tons. You know, but you know, you could ask Bertie Fisher for the shirt off his back and he'd give it to you. That's the type of man he was. Very, very decent and very honourable. You know, and indeed, when I was buying a helicopter back then, I actually asked him, you know, could we go up and have a spin in his and so forth. And another interesting thing happened. We were out flying around, and if you know Sean Quinn's quarry up there, he has some of those big windmills on the side of the hill. And Thomas Corrigan, one of the service guys, was with us the same day, and he was sitting in the back. And of course, Bertie was coming along the side of the hill, and Thomas could see these windmills, and he said over the intercoms, he said, "Bertie, you can pull up anytime you want now." Thomas was getting afraid. So, yeah. But as I say, I actually have Bertie's fueling system here. When I went along and bought a helicopter after that, and when Bertie, Lord of Mercy, died, his brother Ernie called me and said, "Listen, we'd like you, I know you're buying a helicopter," he said, "we'd like you to have the fueling system here because it won't be used by anyone here again." And I said to him, "God, look, Ernie, that's very decent," but I said, I wouldn't take it. I said I'd have to pay you for it. So we did a deal, and it actually sits here. Every time I see it, I always think of Bertie.
Wow. And I notice you have a lot of those, you seem to have a lot of these things in your office. You like that element of nostalgia to look back. And I suppose, isn't it nice to have these things and memories to trigger those sort of things as well?
Yeah. Oh, God, it is. I have a lot of rally photographs here throughout the office with different cars and different events that we did and so forth. And, you know, I have a replica of the Sierra. This is the first Statoil Sierra I had. And, you know, things like that. Of course, look, when you're in rallying, I suppose at the time, and you're like, I didn't start till I was 32, which is late. I was late starting. You just need to start, I suppose, karting when you're 10 or 11. That gives you the thrill of sideways and all that sort of thing. But, you know, 32 was a bit late. But look, I got in it and I took to it, as I said to you, like water to a duck. So I was, you know, I enjoyed it. I really, really, really enjoyed it over the years that we were rallying.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, you know, Bert, you made the joke to Bertie about the results and stuff. You actually got decent results because, you know, we mentioned the podium finish in Killarney. You won West Cork as well. You know, you got a couple of results out of that car.
Oh, yeah. No, that was a super, super car. I mean, it was, when I had it after Bertie, I suppose the difference was, you know, you were driving an ex-works car and you got it from Bertie Fisher as it was built for him. You didn't get anything different. The car was left exactly, but you know, it was just unbelievable, that car. If where you pointed it, it would go. The car was just so good at handling through bends, through tight stuff. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and then I suppose, Stephen, there was a kind of a break in your rallying career, and you came back, I think, in 2004 and won the Wexford Stages Rally. Were you 4 years out of the game fully when you came back, and that was your first event? That's
right, I was, yeah.
That's some going by.
Look, as I said to you, I suppose people that ask me did I practice. And I suppose before any event, the lads would get me to go up the mountain. But sure, I'd only do 3 or 4 runs up the mountain and say, lads, look, that's grand, I'm happy now. I never was one for practicing, if you want to call it practicing. I just would test the car, set the seats, you know, set the car as we thought we'd want it for the rally that was coming up. And, you know, when in that time then you had ProDrive would send an engineer to you, and they were able to read into what way they'd ask you what way the stages were they bumpy or smooth or fast or flowing or whatever, and they'd set the car then exactly. And, you know, that was a whole new learning curve for me, because we would have before that just had the car as we thought it was right. but these guys could go in onto the ECU and then, I suppose, do different things to make the car, I suppose, have a different top speed, or if the stages were tighter, that the top speed would be lowered and you'd have more torque in the car through bends and so forth.
Right, so you come on then and win in 2005 again, just for good measure. And I think possibly 2011 might have been your last one. Do you get itchy feet at all to go back? Do you ever get the urge? Geez, I wouldn't mind a crack at this again one last time.
I saw only Sunday evening. I was looking through on my iPhone and I came across an S12B that's for sale.
Right.
And I kind of said to myself, would you or would you not? And I kind of said, well, you know what? I'm above 60 now. I should have sense and maybe, enjoy the years I had at it. Look, it would be, I'd love to go back and do an event. Of course I would. But like, I'd have to go back, get my license, you'd have to do a national event or whatever. Yeah, I'd do it for the crack. But you wouldn't be competitive. Like the young lads that are out there, like today, the Donna Kellys, the Moffats and all those guys, they're out every weekend and they're at a top level now. And, it would be hard for me to come back and be even at a pace with them. And I'd know that. But that wouldn't stop me from doing an event and enjoying it. The sort of way.
Absolutely. What's the one thing you miss most about it?
The fun that we had. We had, honest to God, we had serious fun. I often remember playing a guitar and singing after the events until 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And just the crack that we had and the camaraderie and the slagging and everything else that went with it, that was what really I enjoyed. And that I miss seriously,
Yeah. And Frank Marr, we mentioned him earlier. Just sum up Frank Marr for us.
Well, I suppose the only event I ever beat Frank on was the Stone Throwers Rally. And two of us had two similar cars. I had the D41A SVW two-wheel drive ex-Jimmy McRae, and he had the Duckham's one, and it was D418 SVB or something like that. And basically, I can still see one part of one stage where we came through a 4 crossroads, kind of half sideways, catching the grass on one side. And a friend of mine, Tom Conley from Bagnallstown, the Tom owns Super Value in Bagnallstown, Tom said to me, he said, geez, I was standing on that crossroad. He said, what if there was a stone in the ditch? And I jokingly said to Tom, no, Tom, look, we had walked that ditch the day before and we knew there was no stones there, which I was joking, but Tom took me as serious, I think. But that was a brilliant event. I really enjoyed that against Frank. Frank, again, was a seriously super competitor and a hell of a talented driver. Really, really talented. And only a pity that I suppose at times he couldn't afford the top cars, because I reckon Frank would have won a lot more rallies if he had the top cars instead of trying to drive a two-wheel drive Escort against four-wheel drive machinery that was out there. But he proved that he could, and he got some great results out of what he had at the time.
He absolutely embarrassed the top machinery, really, when you think about it, in that Mar 2. Wasn't that just serious going, like?
Well, I remember I had a problem with the Sierra, the Escort when I got it first, the first one I had. And I rang Frank. I said, Frank, would you do me a favour? Would you come up and test the car on the mountain with me? Yeah, he said, geez, I'd be only too delighted. When do you want to do it? I said, would Saturday evening suit you? He said, yeah, no problem. So I came on anyway, up to Mount Leinster, and I sat in alongside him, down one road, back up. Second time down, Frank was going a hell of a lot harder, hit a bump, up on the ditch one side, down in the ditch, and up on the far ditch on the other side. And I said, oh, holy mother. Came up to where the car park was, and I swung my right arm and stopped Frank. He said, yeah, all right. No, I said, Frank, stop for a minute. I stood out. No, I said, Frank, you carry on. You tell me when you have the car right. I wouldn't be a good man in the passenger seat. That was the problem I had. I'd have to be driving.
Yeah.
But he was a hell of a man to control the car.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just a great pity he was taken. Isn't it, like, when you consider, Stephen, as well, like, rallying is very safe nowadays. Things have come along so much. But when you consider Bertie and Mark Fisher and Frank were both killed in, like, they weren't even competing. Just one of those things, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I tell you, rallying suffered fierce because of that. I mean, the cream, Mark Fisher was coming behind Bertie, obviously had huge talent, obviously loved the sport as well. And, it was so sad that accident took place with the helicopter and all that. Like, rallying, I suppose, was at a huge loss because Bertie Fisher got killed, and most definitely the same with Frank Marr. And, you can't replace guys like that, in the sense that, that their legend will always live on. So Bertie Fisher, everybody always talks about Bertie Fisher and how good he was, and Tough Mac. And, it was just a super era of rallying that time. I'm not saying that today is any better or any worse, but he was a serious competitor and a really nice man, as I said. And same way with Frank Marr. You could ask Frank Marr, Jesus, Frank, I'm stuck for such a thing, would you have it? And if you had it, again, he'd give it to you. Same with Austin McHale. Austin McHale would give you parts or whatever he'd have if you're doing a rally. We all had that going back then, that if we were stuck for something or stuck for tyres. Tim McNulty, I remember when I came back to do one event, I said to Tim, look, these tyres have changed. Would you give me a hand at the tyres? And in fairness to Tim, yeah, he said, look, I'd use X on this stage and that stage and the other stage. And, there was a huge camaraderie between us. And, that you never forget. And I'd still meet McNulty a couple of times a year and have a drink with him and chat, and the slagging would go on as usual, So you'd miss all that. I have to say you'd miss all that. But sure, life goes on and life changes and life moves in different directions for different people.
That's it. Look, we're going to finish up shortly, but I'm just going to finish by saying, look, it must be obviously a great pleasure for you to be able to look back and say, I dined at the top table with the like of them boys you've named out. But if I was just to ask you for your fondest memory, if I was to put you on the spot, your fondest memory in Irish rallying?
Probably third overall in the Circuit of Ireland. I remember coming up to the podium at the finish and the tears coming down my eyes, because it was the old Circuit of Ireland where you went through the various counties. One of the stages was over not too far from where I live, about 10 miles. And we slid off into a dike, and all the local farmers and guys who were standing on this pushed us out and got going again. And you spend 3-4 days in a car, you get to the finish, and just the sheer, I suppose, adrenaline as you go over the finish ramp. The tears came down my face. I never thought that I could get a result like third overall in the Circuit of Ireland, and that, I suppose, is my fondest memory of rallying.
Great stuff. Stephen, it's a pleasure to have had you on the Irish Rally podcast. Thanks for joining us and really appreciate your time.
Not a bother. Look, the best of luck with that. I hope it all goes well for you, Kevin.
And my thanks to Stephen indeed for joining us on this week's edition of the Irish Rally podcast. Some cracking stories in there, and certainly great to be looking forward to the Wexford Rally also. Thanks again for listening in. Don't forget we're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. You can subscribe and follow the podcast for free on whatever platform you listen in on. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, the email address is irishrallypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again to this week's show sponsor, M. Cody Stoneworks, Castlecomer, County Kilkenny. And until next week, take care.